de inmigrantes indocumentados. Sin embargo, también dicen que de no lograrse algo en esta oportunidad, culparán tanto al Partido Republicano como al Partido Demócrata. ¿Qué posibilidades hay realmente de que se logre algo durante esta gestión del presidente Biden?
Bueno, sí soy optimista porque sabemos que, bueno, demócratas somos la mayoría en el Senado, igual que de la Cámara de Representantes, tenemos el apoyo del presidente. Las reglas del Senado es la dificultad más grande que tenemos. Tener que obtener 60 votos para aprobar esto o buscando manera de que se aprueba con 51 votos. Ese proceso sigue mientras que seguimos negociando los detalles de este proyecto de ley y las reformas más comprensivas, pero sí tengo esperanzas que va a haber progreso este año.
State lawmakers about to consider a new bill to prevent 911 callers from making potentially harmful, false accusations, especially ones based on hate.
AB 1775 is a commitment to everyone in this state that you can live your life without being threatened with deliberately false accusations that could result in bodily harm or death.
That's Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer of Huntington Beach. He authored the bill. He said those calls divert police resources from actual crimes. Jones-Sawyer is proposing harsher criminal penalties when that false accusation is based on racial, religious, gender, or other types of discrimination.
In May, a House Judiciary Subcommittee heard from survivors of the Tulsa race massacre of 1921, where more than 300 black people were killed by a white mob. The same subcommittee is also studying reparations for descendants of millions of slaves, and recently advanced a bill that would create a commission to study the lingering effects of slavery. Do you think reparations will ever come to fruition?
No. Well, yes, I do. And I think that the question is whether that bill, if and when it will be voted on the House floor. We voted it out of committee. We haven't had the debate or vote on the House floor and sending it over to the Senate. But what you're seeing is you're seeing states, cities, counties, universities that are all looking at reparations right now. I mean, the Tulsa massacre is case in point. Now, there are just a couple of people alive today that experienced that massacre, but their descendants are alive and they still live in Tulsa. And the wealth that was robbed from that community that happened in the last century, part of the notion is we can't look back at slavery because it was so long ago. But the bill around reparations is just a bill to study the issue. The issue has been demonized and trivialized to it essentially being African Americans that are looking for free money from the government. And it's anything but that. And so as our consciousness has grown, for example, in LA County, the County Board of Supervisors looking at Bruce's Beach, you know, a land that was stolen from African Americans in Los Angeles. That's a perfect example of what we need to do to rectify the what has happened in our history, whether it's local, state, or national.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California. He previously served as the Secretary of State of California. And Senator Padilla, in your role as Secretary of State, of course, you're closer to the voting process than most senators have ever been. Where do you believe the Senate has to go now? And again, let's be honest about this. This was a show for two Democrats. It was a show for Joe Manchin to prove to him what the Republicans would do. It was a show for Senator Sinema to prove to her what's really happening here. We're going to have another show, apparently, on the John Lewis possibly voting rights bill, where the Republicans will also block that. And apparently sometime after that, Senator Merkley says, then all 50 Democrats will get together and really try to convince these two to come along to change the rule.
Well, Lawrence, good to be back with you. First of all, let's talk about what happened today. Was it disappointing? Yes. Was it shocking? No. And it's certainly not over. What we saw today was, the American people saw one party stands up for fundamental voting rights for all Americans, and one is scared of a debate. What are they scared of? And the reason I say it's not shocking, it's, look at how the year started with the deadly insurrection of January 6th. fixed. And just a few weeks ago, by not supporting an independent bipartisan commission to get to the root cause of that, Republicans clearly walked away from the notion of a peaceful transition of power, and now they're walking away from our fundamental right to vote. So yes, our democracy is on the line.
Now we're going to go back in history for a moment to talk about the Little Rock Nine. This is a group of 9 black school kids in 1957 during the Civil Rights movement. Their attendance at their high school in Arkansas was the site of forced desegregation after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that segregation at public schools was unconstitutional 3 years earlier. President Dwight Eisenhower federalized the Arkansas National Guard and sent them to escort the students into school. It was a pivotal moment in our history, and our Serena Sandoval shows us how this group influenced one politician right here at home. Serena?
This is a picture of Jefferson Thomas. He was part of the Little Rock Nine back in the 50s. I'm Serena Sandoval in Sacramento, and I'll tell you why this picture means so much to one LA legislator.
Someone took a picture.
This picture is the reason why Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer shows up to work at the Capitol each day.
This is the pole that they came and got my uncle at, and these are the crowds in the background.
His uncle, Jefferson Thomas, was part of the Little Rock Nine. 9 students who faced violent mobs in their fight to integrate an all-white high school in 1957.
Every day, somebody would either kick him, spit on him, do some of the worst racially damaging things you could possibly do to a human being. And every day he went back.
His uncle's high school years ended up changing the Assemblymember's whole life.
I was born when he went through that. The reason we're in California is because the Klan called my grandmother and said, get your son out of school or your grandson will never make it to school. That was me. That grandson was me.
Jones-Sawyer is a USC graduate and has completed a prestigious program at Harvard University. And to this day, he uses his education to fight racial injustice.
I've been advocating that everybody, at least one person every day, do their best to end racism from this day forward.
He's chair of public safety and has been working on criminal justice reform since 2012. The Assembly member says he was destined to do this work. And after the death of George Floyd, he says he won't stop pushing until there's change.
I was born in the civil rights movement, and I'm born for social change. And now maybe it's the time. Maybe this is why I'm here. My purpose is now all culminated right now with all my expertise to finally get racism out of the criminal justice system.
He says now more than ever, at least one person needs to stand up to end racism, especially after what happened to Floyd.
Like those cops in Minneapolis, if just one of them had just grabbed that law enforcement officer off of that man's neck, we wouldn't be where we are right now.
Jones-Sawyer stays inspired by his uncle, Jefferson Thomas, one person who took a stand for his own rights.
Wow, thank you so much for that piece, Serena. The Civil Rights Act of 1957 was signed into law by President Eisenhower, aimed to provide federal protection for African-American voting rights. While it had limited impact on voter participation, the act did establish the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Congress later passed a far more effective Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Congresswoman Karen Bass, they want to welcome you to our virtual town hall with 2 of my very esteemed colleagues in the legislature, one in Sacramento and one in Washington, D.C. So I am joined by Senator Alex Padilla and Assemblymember Reginald Jones-Sawyer. And I have to tell you, I sure enjoyed seeing the news coverage of both of you. That was a great story, Reggie. I did know about your family, but seeing it in that context was great. And I have gotten used to seeing California's newest senator. As a matter of fact, I was just watching him on MSNBC maybe about an hour ago. So Senator Padilla, I know that you're in Washington because the Senate is in session, but we still have another week. And for both the senator and the assembly member, you know, I love doing town halls, and I do look forward to the day that we do a town hall in person again. And we think that we might be able to do that in September or so. I think by then we'll be able to safely figure out how to do an in-person town hall. And when we are there, I do want to invite the senator and the assembly member back, especially Senator Padilla. Now, we've known Alex for a very long time, but he's in a brand new role, much bigger role. And so we are going to want to hear from him this evening. And then Assemblymember Reginald Jones-Sawyer has played such a leading role in the legislature on criminal justice reform, and we're going to look forward to hearing from him as well. So I know you know the senator, but I want to tell you a little bit about him. He was born and raised, grew up in Los Angeles, but did you know he graduated from MIT with an engineering degree? We've known him as an elected official for a long time, but once upon a time, he thought he was going to be an engineer. And maybe he can figure out how to engineer the Senate so that we can get voting rights and a whole lot of other things done. Well, when I was in Sacramento, I went to Sacramento in 2005, and Alex Padilla, who was the president of the city council, and I remember when he got elected to city council. I don't remember how old he was, barely old enough to be an elected, but I know he was the youngest person ever elected to the city council. Well, after he was up in the state Senate for a while, he ran to be California's Secretary of State. But I'm going to tell you something that I bet a lot of you don't realize about the senator. And that is when you go to a restaurant and when you look at your menu, and on your menu, you have the calories. Now, I know most of the time I like to see it, but you know, if it's something I really want, I kind of hate to see it. But I think that was a monumental change toward making California healthy. And I remember when he led that fight in Sacramento. And needless to say, the Restaurant Association acted as though the restaurants were going to all go out of business because of this. But that was a change that I think has impacted all of our lives in a healthy way. And I remember very well when he led that fight because it was quite controversial when he was in Sacramento. But then when he becomes the Secretary of State, he's in charge of voting for our state. And it's one of those many reasons why we're so lucky that we live in California, because we don't really have to deal with, I mean, I know there might be individual acts of voter suppression that we have to be concerned about, but what we don't have to be concerned about is our state legislature passing crazy voter ID laws, nor do we have to worry about our Secretary of State's office passing crazy voter ID laws, because if anything, while Padilla was Secretary of State, he expanded voting, first time ever, mailing all of the ballots out in California. So let me go on to Reginald Jones-Sawyer. And I think I just received a note that said the senator is in budget negotiations. Okay, and so he'll be joining us a little later. So after that long introduction, I'm gonna introduce my good friend and colleague, Reginald Jones-Sawyer. And again, I know people know Reggie, but I'm still remind you about his background. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because there's like over 1,000 people on this Zoom right now. And so I might know him, many people might know him, but there are some that don't. Well, I want you to know that the Assembly member has had a lifelong history of public service. I remember when he was the assistant deputy mayor for the city of Los Angeles. I bet a lot of people didn't know that. He was also the chair of LA County Small Business Commission, the vice president of SEIU, labor background, Los Angeles Professional Managers Association, and the statewide secretary of the California Democratic Party. He holds a degree from USC, go Trojans, and a certificate from the Harvard Kennedy School. So he's been in the Assembly for nearly 9 years. Reggie, you've been that long? Wow.
Well, it goes by fast.
It sure does. Well, he's focused on many issues that are important to me and many people in the district. Numero uno is preventing and addressing homelessness, the #1 issue in our city, disrupting the school to prison pipeline and helping people come home after incarceration. And you know that all of those issues are interrelated. And so that is having the Assembly member play a very, very important role. Well, he has chaired the Public Safety Committee for a long time. And for the first time, his Senate counterpart is also chairing the Public Safety Committee, as two African Americans chairing public safety. So I hope that means that we're going to get a lot of criminal justice reform done, Reggie. Well, I want you to know that today was an important day, but I think I'm going to let him talk about Senate Bill 2 going through his committee, and then today, AB 89. Both two very important bills. I'm not going to go into details because I'm going to let him do that. So, Assemblymember Reginald Jones-Sawyer, why don't you take it away? Tell us what's going on in Sacramento. And I am so glad that Sacramento has all that money. So yes. Tell us how the people on this call are going to get some of that.
So I will tell you that, but let me just start with, I've known both Alex Padilla and Karen Bass for a long time. In fact, I was their landlords at one time. That's right. I was director of real estate for the city, and I helped Community Coalition buy the building they're in right now. And when Alex Padilla was president of the League of Cities, I evicted him. So this is for young people. Be careful how you treat people as you're on your way up, because one day they may be the most powerful person in Congress and a junior U.S. senator one day. And so I always kid Alex about that, but we've known one another for quite some time and worked together on quite a few things. And when I got elected, I was the first group to get 12 years. And I remember talking to Congresswoman Bass about when she was Speaker of the California State Assembly, and they had no money. Matter of fact, they didn't have a pot to piss in. They had nothing. And she said, I am so jealous because every day since I've been elected, we've had nothing but surpluses. And this year we have historic surpluses, like over 100 billion with a B in dollars in surpluses. You know, the
government. Stop! Stop! I have to interrupt you. When I was there, the budget of California was 120 billion, and it was reduced to $83 billion. We had to cut $40 billion out of the state budget. Okay, Reggie, what's the state budget? You just said with the surplus, and we had no surplus.
Right. We're over $200 billion. And that is because of the work that you did in making cuts. And then when we came back, Governor Brown made sure we didn't overspend. And because of the cuts you made and the wise decisions you made, we're able to put like $30 billion away in a rainy day fund. Think about what I just said, $30 billion in a rainy day fund, just in case bad times come. And we paid off the debts that was created during that time. And it really was because we started smart budgeting and we started doing one-time monies instead of bloating the budget with ongoing costs. And that has done us well to this day. And so what we're doing right now is almost like we're Oprah Winfrey. You get a car, you get a car. I mean, it is unbelievable. I can just tell you, just in my district alone, for example, Kedron, which is a medical facility, mental health facility, which is in South LA, which has come on, not hard times, but the buildings are dilapidated. And so now I'm able to give them $30 million to upgrade Kedron Mental Health Center so we can send the homeless there. We can send people with mental health problems. Heck, we may even send law enforcement there with mental health problems right there in our own neighborhood. And we don't talk about it enough. Reverend Lawson, who's a legend in the civil rights movement, there's $15 million going to him to rename the Labor Center and do renovations for the UCLA Labor Center. And it's going to be named the Reverend Lawson Labor Center. There's just so much that we're doing. And in addition to the billions and billions of dollars, as you mentioned, for homelessness. And so that people don't have to worry about the money. We just have to be able to get it done. It's really, like I tell people, it's not legislation, it's implementation. If anything has shown us anything, is the amount of money that we're now pouring into homelessness and housing It's about being able to implement it much better than we have before. And because it's not a question of money anymore.
Well, Reggie, will you talk about, I believe the governor made an announcement today about back rent. I don't know if you are aware of that, but if you are, could you share what he actually said?
So if you're a renter and you can provide proof of that the pandemic really affected you adversely, we will help you pay your rent. The state of California will provide coverage. In addition, we will also help landlords to get through this hard economic time with financial. The state has allocated about $5.2 billion, with a B, to provide renters and landlords with payments to get them back on their feet. This is an unprecedented act that was needed to put our state in really in full recovery mode. In addition, we extended the states, and this is probably more important to your thousands of people who are listening or hundreds of people listening, the state's eviction moratorium has been extended to September 30th, 2021. So during the summer and into the fall, no one has to worry about getting evicted during this time.
You know, that is so important because oftentimes, I mean, and obviously we're concerned about all of the renters, but I think sometimes we forget that most of the landlords are just small mom and pop landlords that might have a triplex or might have a duplex. And so their needs are really important. Sometimes landlords, we make the assumption that it's big corporate entities and it's not. And so that is just tremendous. Well, I see we have been joined by our senator. Senator, I just told everybody all about your life a few minutes ago and all of your accomplishments. But you know what? I reminded them of one of your accomplishments because I remember this so well back when you were a state senator a long time ago and you did the menus. You did the menus. You remember? Everybody was so upset about that. I thought it was great. I do get mad at you though when there's something that I want to eat and then I see it's like 1,000 calories, so I can't buy it. But I think that was like a huge accomplishment for public health. And so anyway, I already introduced you, so you just take it away. You just came from budget negotiations. Tell us what's going on.
All right. Well, thank you, Congressmember Bass. It's been great to partner with you, both in the legislature. Now we're both here in Congress over the years. And of course, to see my friend Reggie Jones-Sawyer, who I've known since my days in City Hall, Los Angeles City Hall. Great to be with both of you tonight. And yes, on that menu labeling, that made me pretty unpopular with some of my friends. And I got to remind a whole lot of constituents, look, I'm not telling you what you can or cannot order, just making sure you have the information. So an occasional splurge is okay, but knowing that conditions like type 2 diabetes is especially prevalent in our communities. You know, we just need to be mindful of it, trying to eat a little bit healthier, get a little bit more exercise for the sake of our health and that of our families. But no, it's so I don't have breaking news to report other than, hold on, I'm building suspense here. We have a deal. Congresswoman, you've heard, anybody who's been paying attention to this infrastructure negotiations news knows that a couple of weeks ago on the Senate side, some of my Democratic colleagues and Republican colleagues, about 22 in total, announced an agreement on a bipartisan infrastructure deal. And there's a lot good in that, right? A lot of roads and highways and broadband investment, et cetera. But we've known all along that that figure of $600 billion is not nearly enough to tackle all the needs of our nation, whether it's in the infrastructure, transportation, water systems, et cetera, but also the investment in families that President Biden campaigned on and suggested when he announced the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. So Senate Democrats have gotten together, at least the members of the Budget Committee together with leadership, and we're going to have a $3.5 trillion plan that we'll be announcing tomorrow. So we'll share all the details tomorrow, but you take that $3.5 trillion together with the bipartisan package of about $600 billion, and it's going to be about 4.1, close to the number that the president first suggested on a comprehensive infrastructure. What it really means, we're investing in not just in infrastructure, but jobs in America and American families in a way that emphasizes inclusivity and equity, right? We know for far too often in our nation's history, we've had these big, bold investments in programs and in infrastructure, and our communities have been left out. We're going to be prioritized in this infrastructure plan in terms of where the projects are sited, who gets the jobs, and of course, who disproportionately benefits when we're subsidizing childcare or extending the childcare tax credit. You know, when we're funding universal preschool, all the kinds of things that we've been talking about and working towards. And so it's not the finish line here tonight, but I think it's a huge, big step in setting in motion critical votes over the next month or so to get this done. And you know, the American Rescue Plan that we voted on a few months ago was the stopgap emergency funding for governments, for families, for small business owners because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This infrastructure plan is really to help boost our economy for years and years and decades ahead in a way that's inclusive, like I said, of all communities. So sorry I'm late, but it's for a good reason. And you'll get a lot more information when we unveil the details tomorrow.
We are glad you were there advocating on our behalf, and we know you were. And let me just tell you, I mean, I know it sounds like a ton of money, $1 trillion. One of these days I'll figure out how many zeros go to $1 trillion. But
a whole lot.
Exactly. But you know, one of the reasons why it's so important what the senator just described is because, Senator, when I got there, all we were doing, just like Sacramento, was cutting. I mean, we had the sequestration that we all had to figure out. And we watched over the years, defense spending continue to rise, even though it was supposed to be sequestered. But yet, when it comes to spending for domestic things and for needs, human needs, family needs, then all of a sudden we don't have the money. And so the idea that we are going to put this bipartisan package together is really, you know, sweet justice, because it's bringing us back to where we should be, even though I know that some of our Republican colleagues are painting it as though it's a waste of money. They had no problem at all spending $1 trillion when they were giving themselves tax cuts. And I say themselves because I don't think the three of us on this call qualify in that tax bracket that benefited from those tax cuts. So I appreciate that. And Alex, you haven't been there very long. And so tell everybody, what committees are you on? What are you working on?
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So for those who might not have tracked the initial appointment announcement back at the beginning of the year, good news for California when our own Kamala Harris was elected Vice President of the United States, that she had to formally vacate on January 20th when she was sworn in. And so that created a vacancy. And by state law, the governor of California appointed her replacement. And I had the tremendous honor of being named the new senator for California. So I've been in this job for about 6 months. And in that time, yes, assembling a staff and, coming up to speed on a whole lot of issues. But, part of the role that we play is serving on key committees that helps us advance the agenda for California. So I do sit on the Homeland Security Committee, and that helps, deal with some real-time immigration issues, cybersecurity issues, those sorts of things. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. So if you care about, police reform and voting rights or immigration reform, that's the committee of jurisdiction. I also, Karen, I just got here, but I already chair a subcommittee, the subcommittee on immigration, which is a big, big deal. And of course, no state has more interest in that than the state of California. I serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee. So, all the talk that you've heard in California about addressing climate change, environmental protection, environmental justice, and of course, investing in things like public transit and things like that. That's the committee that does a whole lot of that and is a big part of this infrastructure negotiation So I'm California's voice on that committee. I'm a member of the Rules Committee. That's the other one that deals with voting rights because it's jurisdiction over federal elections. And so my prior experience as California Secretary of State couldn't be more timely. You know, in California, we have it good, right? You have multiple ways to register to vote, online, same-day registration, that sort of thing, and multiple ways of being able to cast your ballot. You can vote by mail, you can vote in person, you can vote early. But that's not the case in every state. You've heard the news about what's happening in Georgia, in Arizona, and now in Texas and other places. So I get to bring my elections experience to bear in the Rules Committee in the United States Senate. And of course, I'm on the Budget Committee. So again, just came from that Budget Committee negotiations to announce this Democratic deal. So I've been here 6 months. I'm busy, but all for good reason.
And let me also point out that, you know, you say you just came from the Budget Committee negotiations, but it is 9:30 there. But it's 9:30 there. So anybody that thinks that, you know, life of a senator is kind of easy and spectacular, he's still at work. He's still in his office, and it's just 6:30 here. Well, Reginald, how about your committees? I know you're in public safety. You chair public safety. But tell us about those. Tell us about what's going on.
On public safety, I'm really excited because, as you mentioned earlier, we have 2 African-American males that are charged of public safety on the Senate and the Assembly side. There are 2 important public safety bills that went through and were passed today out of Public Safety Senate and Public Safety Assembly. One is the Peace Act. That's the Peace Officers Education and Age Conditions for Employment Act, where we're making a mandatory age that they have to be 21, because as most women will tell you, most men don't age until they're 30, but we settled on 21. And they have to have some kind of educational requirement, an AA, where they have critical thinking, sociology, psychology, critical race theory, so that when they go out into the field, they're not just an empty vessel. We want to fill them in what we think is the new way of policing. What did your colleagues say, Clyburn? We keep looking at these bad apples. We need to look at the root of the tree. This will change the root of the tree so that we bring in people that are better educated, more mature. And we found from research that college-educated law enforcement officers have the lowest amount of police violence than anyone else. They do better grades when they get through, and they're able to move through the system. The other one, which I'm really proud of, that came through my committee, that I was able to shepherd through, was Senator Steve Bradford, to decertify police. Right now, a police officer can perform some kind of violence on someone, leave the department, go to another department, and start working and doing the same kind of damage there. We're not going to take away their license to be a police officer. We do it for lawyers, doctors. We do it for everybody else, but we don't do it for them. It passed out of my committee today, and it'll go to appropriates and then to the floor. This will, in some ways, I'm embarrassed for us as Californians. 46 other states already have decertification bills that have passed and laws that are in place. Think about it. We're last. We're supposed to be the leaders in public safety. And so I'm glad that we're catching up. But most important, I'm glad that I have a partner on the other side, that we can work together to change law enforcement permanently into the kind of law enforcement that we all want, and stop talking about it. Let's actually do it and make a change.
Well, Reggie, I have to tell you that I think I'm going to have to make you come back to DC, because I mean, the things that you just described are in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And we actually have the Peace Act that's a part of the bill, but our Peace Act is different. It's really focusing training on de-escalation. And, you raise a good issue around age, because I wonder if you look at officers who are younger than 25, where they fall in terms of excessive force. Because one thing that we do know about the age of 25 is that the brain is developing until then an executive function, which is your decision-making process, doesn't mature until later, and you are impulsive before then. And I just wonder if you do have more excessive force in the younger ages. It would be an interesting thing to see.
We do have data that show that, but just anecdotally, just look at it. You give an 18-year-old a badge, a gun, and a license to kill. That doesn't make sense on any level whatsoever. And so that's why you've got to raise the level, the age, the maturity level, because that's, I mean, we got to look at law enforcement almost like doctors. We got to stop going for quantity. We need to go for quality. And when I hear about law enforcement saying that these laws in California are forcing people to leave, maybe we need them to leave because they don't want to do the new policing. Maybe they know the way that they're behaving, the way that they've been a law enforcement officer is not a peace officer. I'm trying to create, and we're trying to create California peace officers, people that show up and de-escalate. They want to keep peace. They don't want to enforce. We're not in African-American, Latino communities. We don't want a force coming in to keep us under control. It's just a different way of policing.
And I do have to say, you said 18 and with the gun, and it made me think of our military, because we actually don't have a problem with that. But, you know, it's time to begin to rethink some of these things. And so you talked about what we describe in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act as a national registry. You know, Tamir Wright, who was killed when he was 12 years old, I guess he was so threatening at 12, he was a child. Well, the officer that shot and killed him in Ohio had just been fired a few months before, and he was fired because he had a propensity for violence and was viewed as unstable. And what happens in a lot of places, I don't know if it happens in our city, but it does happen in a lot of other cities where these officers just bounce from one department to the other. And so the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is over in Alex's house, and I know he's working hard trying to get the votes together. And I've been working diligently with Senator Tim Scott and Senator Cory Booker. And fingers crossed, they will have a product by the end of the week so that when I get back there next week, we can actually say, do we have something to vote on? It passed out of the House. So a new bill that will be created in the Senate that then will have to come back to the House. So fingers crossed, because frankly, if we don't get it done before the end of July, I think we're going to be in trouble because we will be in August recess. And now the narrative is beginning. Crime is ticking up as it does in cycles. And so now some people are saying, well, we shouldn't do police reform because the reason why crime is ticking up is because we've tied the hands of police, which of course is completely false. Senator, a number of people in preparation for this call wanted to know about voting rights. And what better person to ask than the former Alex Padilla, who did amazing work in his time and talking about democratizing elections. I mean, sending ballots to everyone. That was done as one of your last acts as Secretary of State, if I'm not mistaken. And again, I think, and unless you agree, Mr. Former Secretary, current Senator, in California, we don't really have to worry about voter suppression. I know we do in isolated pockets, but in terms of our state leaders and all, you know, I mean, you guys don't have crazy voter suppression laws in Sacramento that would probably even ever see the light of day. So maybe you could talk a little bit about voting rights, the idea that hopefully you will vote on it in the Senate, where we are and where we stand in California.
Right. No, appreciate the question. It's personal to me. As you said, I was California Secretary of State. So Reggie Jones-Sawyer and his colleagues do not have to walk out of the Capitol to break quorum to keep bad things from happening. That's, you know, it sounds funny, but that's what's really happening in the state of Texas right now. Because they want to, just one small example, among other things that they want to do to make it harder for eligible people to vote, ban drive-through voting. Not that everybody takes advantage of it, but voters with disabilities rely on that when they're, you know, going to the polls to cast their ballot or to drop off their ballot. And it just is an example of how cynical voter suppression and how extreme voter suppression efforts are, not just in Texas, but in so many other states. So it's really sort of a good news, bad news answer I have for you, Karen. In California, the good news is we lead the nation both on election security and access to the ballot. Right, voter fraud is extremely rare. Every study, every investigation, every commission has demonstrated that. And at the same time, we give voters multiple options for how easily to register on paper form if you want, online if you'd like, automatic registration through the DMV, or if you miss any deadlines that used to exist, you can show up on election day or during early voting, register and vote same day. There's secure ways to do that. California offers all those options. For casting your ballot, same thing. You want to vote by mail, that's become almost a default. Doesn't get more convenient, no pressure of a line behind you at the polls and you feel like you have to hurry. You do it at the comfort of your own home. You can mail your ballot back. You can drop it off in person. You can drop it off at a county ballot drop box. You have all these options. If only I could say that was the case in every state in the nation. In a lot of states it is. They're moving in that direction, but in too many states, you've heard the news, Georgia, Texas, Iowa, Alabama, they're going backwards on voting rights. And so I think this gets to the gist of your question. What's happening, not just in Congress, the House has already done its part, right? You passed H.R. 1 already to protect our fundamental right to vote. Hasn't passed the Senate yet because of this, I'm going to use the F word, the filibuster. The filibuster rule in the Senate requires not a simple majority, but a supermajority to be able to pass laws. So that's why this voting rights bill, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, hasn't passed the Senate. The For the People Act hasn't passed the Senate. So as I've been saying since the beginning of the year, look, we either need to get rid of the filibuster, which we know over the years has been used to obstruct. It goes back to the Jim Crow era, or at least we got to carve out an exemption for laws that will protect our fundamental democracy, our right to vote. Doesn't get more basic than that, to be able to get that done with a simple majority, because we have the majority and we need to make sure it means something. Our voting rights are under attack in state houses across the country. And so Congress needs to act. We haven't done it yet, but we're going to have to find the pressure points to get this done soon, because the 2022 elections will be here before we know it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And again, we just are very fortunate that we don't have some of the issues. But, I do think in some areas like Central California, Orange County, I am concerned that there will be tactics to intimidate voters at the polls. But
one of the things that we promote before every election, or at least I used to when I was Secretary of State, is in California we went a further step. All the things that are common sense for us, we codified in state law. You can Google it. There's a California Voters Bill of Rights, right, in statute. So it's enforceable by the Attorney General or anybody else. And included in that Bill of Rights is the right for an eligible voter to cast their ballot free of any harassment or intimidation. And I know that my successor, now Secretary of State Shirley Weber, is an equally passionate defender of that right to vote. In their lead up to every single election, the state sets up a voter hotline. I think I still remember the number. It's only been about 6 months. 1-800-345-VOTE. So I encourage any voter with any question, any time of year, frankly, to call the Secretary of State's office, the Elections Division, ask your questions, report any issues, report any problems. They're ready there. They're standing by to look into any bad experience that you might have had and to initiate any investigation if it's warranted.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again. We are very, very lucky. Reggie, one of our constituents, and we share constituents since our districts overlap, has asked the $500,000 question, the EDD, the Employment Development Department. What are we doing to fix it? And then also, maybe you can tell people how to access, if you know, I know the announcement was just made, so you might not know, But when the governor made the announcement about relief for renters, how do they actually get the money for their back rent? So 2 questions, EDD and back rent, if you know the answer for that. You're muted. You're muted, Reggie.
I believe I have staff on the line right now that can get you the number for the rental assistance, and we'll do everything we can to make sure you get those numbers. As my grandmother used to say, "Oh Lord, today," when it comes to EDD, I think EDD may have been a problem when you two were here.
Yes.
And EDD for one, let's just start with the technology. They probably have the same technology that was here when you two were here in the Senate and the Assembly. And so obviously technology, as the MIT grad will tell you, changes almost every 5 years. And so obviously we got to upgrade the technology we had that was probably put in the 90s. In addition, fraud was a significant failure during this time. And it really showed us, COVID showed us the frailty of that system. And this is where I came in, when you find out that people who are incarcerated, that are in CDCR, that are in prison, were able to receive checks. I think Scott Peterson, who murdered his wife, was able to receive an EDD assistance check. That tells you that we have a lot of work to do. And one of the things I notice is, systems sometimes work in silos, especially in government, but they never talk to one another. And this is one of those cases where if they had just shared information, they would have found out there was a problem almost immediately. But in government, we want to have our own thing, and we're going to have our own silo. And so Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo is now over Sub 4, which handles state government and that department. And she's vowed to start working with the new Secretary for EDD to make those changes that are needed right now. Obviously, we have the funding, we can make sure that happens, but she also wants to look at systemic problems within the department, because quite frankly, there's the morale is extremely low. They're overworked. And I think a lot of it is because they're not working smart. And that's exactly what the Assemblywoman has told me, that she wants to go ahead and make those changes so that we don't have these problems with what's going on right now. And so there's been additional staff that's been brought on to help us in the Assembly. Matter of fact, my staff was handling more EDD calls than doing Assembly work. What people had to do. It was overwhelming. But now, because of her leadership, we now have more staff so that we can help make sure that the funding and the resources that EDD provides get to people, not only quicker, but actually get to them. Some people have been waiting for weeks at a time. We're going to reduce those times over the summer so that EDD is working the way it should be. And I honestly believe that the Assemblywoman probably won't rest until that gets done.
Well, I do remember EDD having major problems when I was there. And I remember from the Speaker's office having to give EDD money because they didn't have enough money to hire their workers. So it's been a long-term problem, and we have to figure out what we're going to do long-term. Well, in a minute, Senator, I'm going to ask you if you could talk about some more really good news, the child tax credit that everybody is beginning to receive. Not everybody that's eligible. It will begin to receive checks soon. But before I asked you to talk about that, Joel Bellman is asking about the country's mental health system. And I couldn't agree with you more. He's basically raising the question that we have an important moment right now when we really should look to do what should have been done back in the 70s when we shut down the major mental health institutions. We promised that we were going to build a community-based system. We never did. And so now what we have done in our country is we have basically by default decided to incarcerate people who are mentally ill. And then I know after George Floyd was shot, and I was looking at officer-involved deaths over the last year, a huge number were police responding to mental health crises. And I don't think anybody goes into the academy to be a police officer with the idea in mind that they're going to come out and their primary responsibility is going to be rounding up people who are mentally ill. And so in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that I am working on, not the bill that passed the House, but the bill that we're working on in the Senate, one of the things we want to include in that is several $100 million into the Department of Health and Human Services for co-responders, so that when a family member is in crisis, instead of calling the police, and then you have to sit there and pray that the police don't kill your family member, that you actually call a social worker, very similar to child welfare. When the child welfare worker goes and removes a child from home, it's not the police don't go in and descend upon the house. The social worker goes in. The police officer is there if needed, but that's not who deals with the family. But just think about this. If we provided proper health care to people who were mentally ill, they wouldn't deteriorate into a crisis, period. And so we do have an opportunity now. We let our mental health system collapse, in my opinion. And Kedron, I love Kedron, but Kedron, there needs to be 20 Kedrons around the city at a minimum. We just don't have the capacity in our country right now. So we absolutely have to rebuild it. And another person in the chat asked about the international affairs budget. I serve on foreign affairs, and fortunately, we are restoring the budgets that were cut under the Trump years. And we didn't even go along with President Trump's budget cuts. But you know what he did? We would restore the money, and then he just wouldn't spend it. And so now we are trying to rebuild our international reputation, and part of that is rebuilding our budget. So, Senator, can you talk to us about the child tax care credit and talk about the fact that families have already, should have started receiving checks?
Sure. And before I do that, just a kudos to you for everything you said when it comes to mental health. It's a personal passion of mine, not just, but especially because it's a personal passion for my wife, Angela. She's a mental health advocate based on her family's experience. She's got her own nonprofit foundation that helps with a lot of advocacy. I won't go down the rabbit hole of parity and insurance and, police officer training, all those things, but I will make a plug for overcoming stigma. I mean, to get to the policy solutions and the prioritization of resources and programs for mental health, we got to talk about it more publicly. It's mental health conditions run a whole gamut. There's a whole spectrum. And especially in communities of color, we don't talk about it enough because we're fearful of the stigma, or what are people going to say? We got to shake that, right? It's Reggie, if I saw you walking around, I saw you limping, what would I tell you? Or what would you tell me if you saw me limping? Right. You say, hey, what's wrong with your leg? Go see a doctor, go get it checked out. But when, something's just a little off up here, it should be the same thing. It should be just as normal, just as natural, but we don't treat it that way. So the more we talk about it, the more we understand it, I think the more we'll overcome that stigma. But Congresswoman, you must have been reading my mind, because as we were talking a minute ago, I was Googling this. So yes, the good news is that come this Thursday, if you have filed a 2019 tax return or a 2020 tax return, whether it's direct deposit or you get the check in the mail, you will automatically get your child tax credit, which was part of the American Rescue Plan, which we voted on several months ago. So I believe I'm right about this. For a family that has a child under 6, it's $300 per month for every child 6 or under that you have. Children over 6, from 6 to 18, it's $250 a month of a child credit that you're automatically eligible for, that you'll automatically start receiving this Thursday if you filed the 2019 or 2020 taxes. If you haven't, because some lower income families don't earn enough to have to file a tax return, you can still sign up for it because you're eligible. Go to irs.gov. There's one of the buttons on that home screen is information on the child tax credit, and you can sign up there to receive the benefit that you're eligible for if you have children. And last but not least, this is important because look, we have diverse constituents, right? There's a lot of non-citizen parents with citizen children. So you have an individual tax ID number, an ITIN is what people call it, but you have eligible kids, then you're eligible to receive that child tax credit. But same thing, if you have that tax return, it's coming automatically. If you haven't filed that tax return, go to the irs.gov website and make sure you claim that money that's rightfully yours.
Now you're on.
What I'm worried about, Senator, is that, and Assembly Member, is that people can get the checks, and if they don't know that the checks are coming, they might be afraid. They might think that they've received something by mistake, but to know that these checks are yours if you qualify, if you make under $24,000, a head of household makes under $18,000, or a single filer under $12,000, you are eligible for the child tax credit. So that check that is coming in the mail is yours. The other thing I worry about is that some people might have moved, or they might have skipped filing for their taxes. And so, feel free to call the office and we can help you navigate that. But we want to know that the child tax credit is a major advance. We're going to be doing a lot of education work around that. We're going to be sending out letters. We're going to send out postcards to people that we believe are eligible. So expect that check. And you know what? In a way, we're looking at this in the future. This is temporary. We want it to be permanent. And then it's really like Social Security, but Social Security for children. Something that we are one of the few countries, developed countries, advanced countries, that do not provide a number of resources, including universal health care. The ACA, the Affordable Care Act, was a tremendous advance, but it's still not universal, or paid family leave. There's a lot of benefits that developed countries in Europe and Asia and other places provide for their citizens, and we should as well. Now, a couple of people are concerned about vaccine hesitancy, and I really wanted to address this because the vaccine is saving lives. And I realize that the vaccine, just like any other medicine you could take, can have side effects. There can be consequences, but considering that hundreds of millions of people have taken this vaccine already, I would consider it to be safe. And I have to tell you that when it first came out, I was not jumping to get the vaccine because I was concerned that it was political. I was concerned that Trump rushed it. But then when I learned that this vaccine has actually been in development for over a decade, because although COVID-19 is new, it's called 19 because the virus was discovered in 2019, but a COVID vaccine is a cousin to the COVID virus is a cousin to other viruses that have been around for a long time. And so I know that there are side effects. I know that Moderna, does not have the final FDA approval, but understand that hundreds of millions of people have taken this vaccine, and also understand that the deaths and hospitalizations that are occurring now are from people who are not vaccinated. So I just hope that people are not deterred by that. And someone asked me if I supported what Jean Sachsenaki, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name, said, where she said she wanted to send out people to go door to door. I absolutely support that. Not only do I support that, and Reggie and Alex, we're going to be talking about this soon, because we need to start going door to door. And I know that there are communities that are community organizations that are doing that right now. When I found out that the African-American population was had always been African American, Latino, Asian, and Native Americans have been disproportionately impacted by the virus. But right now in LA, the African American population, the numbers for hospitalization and deaths are even more disproportionate than they were before. And so to me, whatever it takes to get that message out there, when I go to the grocery store, I always talk to the clerks. I talk to people on the street and ask them about it. So I am concerned if people are waiting for the perfect situation, because frankly, you could take just about any prescribed medicine or any over-the-counter medicine, and there are also side effects and consequences. That's why every time a medicine is advertised on TV, at the end of it, they tell you 400 things that you could die from taking that medicine. You should know, because I worked in the medical field for a long time, that's a legal announcement. They're doing that to protect themselves from lawsuits, not because if you take a medicine for psoriasis or whatever, that you're going to drop dead after you take the medicine. So I just hope that people are not hesitant, that people will get the vaccine, because we have been dying.
I thank you, Congressman, for sharing that. And I want to echo all that. The only way to get past the pandemic and to fully reopen the economy is when more and more people do get vaccinated. A couple of reasons why some people have been hesitant. Number one, as you said, they're getting bad information about whether or not it works, whether or not it's safe. Yes, it works. Yes, it's safe, especially in Spanish language. There's a lot of disinformation on social media, especially. So go to the source if you've ever talked to a doctor or a nurse, or even the pharmacist at CVS, Walgreens, even at the grocery store. There's pharmacies and grocery stores. Trust a medical expert when it comes to the vaccine. Number two, you do not need to have health insurance to get a vaccine. And it's free. Some people think, well, how much are they going to charge me, or am I going to get billed later? Vaccines are free. It doesn't matter if you have health insurance. We hope you have health insurance, but even if you don't, you are eligible for the vaccine. And if there's non-citizens monitoring this town hall, you will not be asked for citizenship papers or proof of status or anything. This is a public health concern. Not even every adult, every child 14 years and older, or 12 years and older, is eligible for the vaccine. So there's no excuse. And yes, we're coming to the neighborhoods. Once upon a time, maybe you couldn't get to Dodger Stadium when that was the biggest vaccination site in America. But that's okay. That's why neighborhood pharmacies, community health centers, door to door if we have to. Los Angeles County has mobile units that come to different communities over time. We need as many people vaccinated as possible. I got mine back in January. My wife is vaccinated. My dad is vaccinated. My mother-in-law is vaccinated. That's why we're able to get together again and give each other a hug, because we're vaccinated.
The other thing I want us to learn from history, I know we all got vaccinated because we had to get vaccinated before we could go to school, so we wouldn't spread measles, mumps, smallpox, polio. I don't even know if I don't know anybody that I went to school with that had any of that. And that was because everyone got vaccinated. We basically eliminated polio. Mm-hmm. You'd have to talk to a grandparent to understand how scary polio was back in the day. And because of vaccinations, we don't have to worry about 10, 20 different things you can get right now. That should be the proof why you need to do this right now. Because it's already been proven that when you get vaccinated, everyone is safe. And there has even been talk about how do you make it mandatory at the work site here in the Capitol. What can we do to force the issue that have people get vaccinated? Because it's a public health issue. It's not, I know it's, HIPAA, and I know you know that better than anybody else, Congresswoman, but at the end of the day, it is a public health crisis.
Absolutely. And I do not believe that people should be forced to take the shots. But I do think in some situations it should be mandated. Now, what mandated means is that if you don't want to take the shot, then just don't go in. Don't go to the event, or don't go, to the situation. But let me just say, I know one constituent is raising that there might be other alternatives for treatment of COVID. There are definitely treatments for COVID, but treatments in lieu of vaccinations, if you have a treatment, it's because you have COVID. I want to take a vaccination so that I don't get COVID. But let me just say that this has been an amazing hour. I hope that we do this again, Assembly Member and Senator. But you know what? The next time, let's make it in person, okay? Let's make it in person. We can have one of those rowdy town halls that I often do that I think are a lot of fun. But why don't I let the Senator give us some closing comments, then we will hear from the Assembly Member.
Well, thank you, Congressman, again for organizing us and convening us. And my apologies for being a little bit late, but for good reason, because we got some good news coming out. Everybody who's tuned in today or is watching a replay on Facebook or some other platform, I hope the information here has been helpful to all of you. So until we meet again, please contact our offices if we can help with additional information or any constituent services on the COVID front. Again, if you've been vaccinated already, thank you so much. You've been a leader for your family and for the community. If you haven't been vaccinated, please, please, please make your appointment, get vaccinated as soon as you can. And thank you for your support of us as we advocate for, Congress to act to invest in our communities. We did the American Rescue Plan, and we saw the impact of all that, direct assistance to working families, to small businesses, state and local governments, schools are reopening, the economy is reopening. Now we've got to invest in our own future. We talk about this infrastructure. We need to invest in, roads and bridges and our water systems and all that, but also in families to put ourselves in a much better position to succeed economically, making sure every community participates in an economic recovery. That's the infrastructure deal that we're getting ready to announce. And we just going to keep advocating on behalf of not just our districts and the state of California, what's good for the country for the years ahead. So thank you again, and can't wait to the next one in person.
Absolutely. Assembly Member.
Yes, and I hope we are able to do this, not only in person, but to have it recorded. I think the public needs to see us together, needs to see how we work together, see how we are like-minded and how we want to make sure that California is taken care of, the federal and state level. I think sometimes they think we're in silos and they don't think we talk. But also, I think what was proven here is we can share ideas, and we probably, when we get off here, go, oh, the Congresswoman is working on something. I can get information from her to make my bills better, and vice versa. And then the senator can say, oh, you're doing that. Then I can then take the baton and run with it on the Senate side. And I think for the public, they need to see more of that. And I'm not trying to bag on your side, but I know it's a little dysfunctional sometimes in Congress and the Senate. But they need, I think the public really do need to see us working together and talking and things out on a variety. But most important, we gave a lot of information today. I mean, a lot of good information to a lot of different people on various different subjects. And so I think, I would love for us to be on TV. I think we could take this on the road and make California better. And so I definitely want to continue these conversations, because I think it benefits everybody. So thank you for putting this together.
Well, I'm going to take you on the road so you can tell people that police reform is really not that scary and that we should get it done. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending, for participating in this Zoom call with us. And as I said, we will see you again soon. And the next time will be in person. Be well, be safe out there. Look for that check. Talk to your friends, your family members. Let them know that that check belongs to you. It's the beginning of Social Security for children. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.